Hey Peter, how's it going?
Hi, Sadil. Yeah, I'm really good, mate. How's it going?
Yeah, good, thanks. So I think good place to sort of start is the obviously the Queen passing away. I saw yesterday on Twitter and stuff that you were queuing and got to visit the coffin. What was that like?
Yeah, so I decided that I would go and join the queue. So I joined on Thursday. So I seem to have missed the madness that seems to have unfolded. But yeah, it took me about 5 hours and 15 minutes, and I started for everyone who lives in London at Southwark Bridge. So it's about 2 miles I had to queue altogether. So wasn't too bad. I seem to have fell within the average. But I tell you right now, it was something that when they first announced they were doing it, I was like, the queue is going to be horrific. I don't really know if I've got it in me to stand there for that long, and you don't really know what the queue is going to be like. But I tell you right now, I'm very glad I did it. To be able to go and pay your respects like that to the Queen, and really to be part of history, which was a big thing for me. I have to admit, it was something special. Like everybody in the queue, like around me, I kind of, because I'm a northerner, I'll talk to anybody, but yeah, I kind of made friends like in the queue, and everyone's really friendly and chatty. And people were saying there was a woman just ahead of me, and she remembers the coronation, so she was telling everybody where like she was just a young girl, but she was remember saying what she was talking when she was watching the Queen get coronated, and so like people were really sharing stories about the Queen, and there was a woman just behind me as well. She traveled all the way from Brazil to be here for the
Wow.
funeral. Yeah, it really struck me how far people have traveled, what people were willing to kind of stand there for, and just how many different kind of ethnicities, races, religions, so much. And then I have to admit, it's really saddened me. I have to admit, on when I've been reading on Twitter, that some people are trying to make kind of politics out of who supports the Queen the most. I'm like, come on, like the Queen means so much to so many people around the world. And like just making cheap political points at this kind of time. I'm sorry, I don't think it's appropriate if I'm being honest. But each to their own and all that. But
Yeah,
no,
I saw you
go on.
tweet that as well in terms of how diverse the queue and stuff was, which is a really good point. So you're saying a really good mix, age groups,
Oh,
that sort
all ages. I take my hat off to any parent who took their kid to stand in that queue for hours.
of.
Because I mean, by the end of it, I was getting agitated and fidgety, let alone if I was like, I think there was a young girl, she can't have been more than 10. And like, she stood there and, you could tell this the stress on a parent's face. But, there was so many people from all over the world, all, like I said, all different races, religions, and all of it. It was really nice to see, and everybody, like I said, was so friendly, and everybody was just really in the mood to kind of pay respects, but also in a way, it was a kind of, I don't really want to say celebration because I don't think that's the right word, but a kind of way for people, like I say, to share stories about the Queen and to share funny things about the royal family. And like there was a guy just a little bit further in front of me. I could only really hear bits of what he was saying. Well, I get the feeling that he was somewhat of a royal expert, and he was kind of taking people through the history of the royal family, like to this to
Amazing.
another family and stuff. So like there were people really sharing stuff, and there was a real sense of coming together. And like I said, it's just really sad to see some people taking this and using it to kind of beat people over the head with. I'm sorry. I No, for me, it's a hard no.
I definitely agree with that. I think somebody tweeted, I think he was an anti-monarchist, and he tweeted a really good tweet, which was something along the lines of, you have to remember this is someone's great grandmother, someone's grandmother, and mother, and there should be like, especially during this period, just basic level of respect. You don't need to say certain things during this little period. And he was an anti-monarchist, which I thought was a really good, eloquent way of putting it. What does the Queen mean to you in general?
So I'll be perfectly honest. I'm not really like a flag waving royal. I'm not really one of those people. I, I probably would say I was more of a Queen fan than I was of the royal family. There are certain members within the royal family. I think Princess Anne, I think, is a gift to the nation. I have to admit, Camilla has really risen in my estimation, of course, Will and Kate. But the Queen in particular, for me, I think it's just really symbolized that stability and doing everything with doing the duty that that she gave herself to, but also doing it with a sense of grace and doing it with not necessarily like with a smile on her face. Don't get me wrong. I imagine she's been to some things that she's like, why am I at this? You know, she's just having a bad day. You know, like everybody else has a bad day. But the Queen has done it with such professionalism, and she's held the title and she's held the position. And I think she's probably one of the greatest ambassadors this country will ever, ever have. I think Will and Kate have done a bang-up job. I think Charles, to a degree, is doing a good job. But I think the Queen, it just symbolizes so much for so many people. And it's been really interesting to see, just even like you say, some of the most ardent anti-monarchists have paid real respect, like real heartfelt respect to the Queen and to the royal family, you know, because let's not forget, they've lost a grandmother and a mother. And, you know, I think we kind of forget this kind of human aspect of the royal family a little bit. But yeah, like like I said, for me, the Queen is just that embodiment of so much that she just held together for this tiny little old woman. That it seems bizarre to me, really, when you kind of look at the world's media. Just everyone's talking about it. And just this little old 96-year-old woman, you know, who realistically doesn't hold that much power, but you know, it's just the world has stood still since her death, and I just think that's incredible. And I think we're very privileged to have lived like during her reign, and I think what comes next is going to be very interesting. I do have to admit.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people would probably be similar to yourself, who aren't necessarily massive royalists but love the Queen. So that will be. I have to say, I wouldn't say I'm a massive royalist, but I do believe in the monarchy and the royal family, and I want it to carry on. I actually like what now King Charles has said in the past, and I think he said it recently about slimming down the monarchy, so just having a much more concise version, so not going as far out. I think that's quite a more modern, forthright view. I think more people will be on board with that. But I'm generally, I'd say I am fairly strong in favor of the monarchy. Are you concerned now that the Queen's no longer around, and now we've got King Charles, obviously not the same in terms of popularity? Are you concerned of, you know, what happens next, especially because you're obviously very, you know, you've got lots of political ties, and you know a lot what's going on in Westminster. Is that a bit of a concern? Are people concerned?
For me, I think there is going to be one of the biggest cultural battles about to be waged in this country. And I think that there's a lot of people not quite prepared for it. So I'm very much on your side of this in saying I'm a big fan of the monarchy. I'm a big fan of constitutional monarchies. I'm a fan of the way that our system operates. I think it does it very well. I think it is the way that most countries really should be run. And I think having a head of state that is outside of politics is the way it should be. I'm not a big fan of republicanism and all of that. However, there's a lot of people like myself who, for a long time, haven't really had to have the real debate about defending the monarchy and defending the way that we do things, because we've had the Queen. Because the Queen has been in place, and because she's been a kind of national figure where everybody just respects the Queen. They might not like the royal family, but they respect the Queen. We've never really had to have this fight. And we never really had to defend our position with any real fervor. Now she's gone, there is a lot of people who've been waiting for the Queen to go, to really get to grips with this argument, to have this argument, and to push what they think the way the country should look like and should be governed and all the rest of it. And I do believe that, like I said, there's a lot of people just not prepared for it. How hard the kind of anti-establishment rhetoric is about to become. Like you said, Charles isn't as popular as the Queen, and I don't think he ever will be. My fear of King Charles now, I keep calling him Prince Charles, but my fear of King Charles now is going to be that he's going to be too political. I think that this is a common criticism that he's going to face, particularly on things like climate change and his opposition to the Rwanda immigration policy a couple of months ago. You know, he keeps putting his foot in it. And I think that's going to really stir on a lot of people, kind of giving them an excuse to kind of push this kind of anti-establishment rhetoric. And yeah, like I said, I think we're in for a major shift in this country and in the world in general. I think like we said, we're going to actually talk about the Commonwealth, and I think the greatest legacy of the Queen is the Commonwealth. But I think now the Queen is gone, I expect to see a couple of more referendums. I expect to see a couple of more moves by member states of the Commonwealth to say, should we really be a part of it? Shouldn't the royal family still be the head of state? This argument is coming, and it's coming hard. And I think around the world and here in the UK, those of us that want things to not necessarily stay the same, but to continue down the same kind of path, have to really get to grips with this, and have to have a very strong set of arguments that can kind of rebuff what is going to be, I think, a little bit of a populist kind of narrative. And I just don't know if there's enough people ready for the fight. That's my fear. But yeah.
Do you see it sneaking into sort of UK politics? For it, you again making massive generalizations. You'd presume it'd be more on the left. People would tend to be more anti.
I think, so it'll be very popular on the left. It'll be very popular with the kind of, like I said, the anti-establishment, the more socialist aspect of this country. They like I said, there's a lot of people been waiting for the Queen to pass away so they can really push this narrative and actually really get to grips with it. But whether it becomes a mainstream issue, I don't really know just how mainstream it's going to become. It might start off as a fringe thing, and then it slowly creep into certain aspects. I think particularly when you kind of tie it in with the cost of living crisis and the energy crisis, and as people start to feel the pinch, that we're going to start to have these debates about who funds the monarchy, and is it? Don't get me wrong, there are really strong arguments to rebuff most of this nonsense, but we've got to nail these arguments down. We've got to start all singing from the same hymn sheet, that kind of thing. So I think it will creep into the mainstream. How successful it is, I don't know. And that's going to be the real question. We're going to have these arguments. Whether the anti-establishment lot are going to be very good at convincing people, I'm not so sure. I genuinely couldn't tell you, but it's going to be a very interesting, I'd say, next 5-10 years on this issue. It's not going to happen straight away. It's just not. But I think definitely 5-10 years, we're going to have, I don't think a referendum, but we're going to have a national conversation about where the monarchy sits in our system, what the purpose of it is. And I think what you mentioned earlier about Charles wanting to slim down the royal family and kind of make the royal family work a bit more and make them seen as more kind of involved in things, I think is the royal family recognizing that this conversation is coming. So I think they're going to start changing now, so that when the debate comes, they can say, well, look, in the last 10 years, we were able to achieve this. And I think that's what they're going to really start doing. We're going to start seeing them more in a kind of ambassador role around the world. Well, I think from what I've read, particularly when Harry left the main royals and all the rest of it, that was what really annoyed the Queen the most, was the fact that she'd been really grooming Harry and William to take on this kind of mantle, to take on this kind of modern monarchy, this kind of this ambassadorship, taking on things like at the Invictus Games, and playing more roles in things rather than just nodding and waving, that kind of positions. I think that's really what annoyed her the most about his departure. And I think Will and Kate in particular has really taken up this mantle. But it will be interesting, like you say. But again, a lot of this stuff is all very hypothetical at the minute, because we're still in this mourning period. So it's really, once this mourning period just ends, will the anti-establishment lot go hell for leather and really kind of push this argument? I think they'll be stupid if they do, but there'll be some who are raring for it. I mean, you've got some already going on things like Good Morning Britain and stuff, who are frothing at the mouth and waiting to have this argument. And I think it's a little disappointing to see, but again, each to their own when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I've seen that, and I think I definitely agree. I think there's going to be loads more conversations. I'm hoping the example I keep using everywhere is the Australian referendum in the late 90s, where they held a referendum against John Howard. He did the referendum pro-monarchy, or should they become a republican, and there was a massive anti-royal family, anti-monarchy movement the whole of the 90s. I think it really propelled with Diana's passing away, and that really pushed it to another level for them to sort of say, we don't want the Queen as our head of state, and we don't want monarchy. But what in the end, interestingly, we had him on our platform, and he basically said what ended up happening was the people who were anti-monarchy, the people who were anti-royal family, they couldn't come to an agreement on what we should do next. And there was almost an acceptance that there was a lot of people in the end who were not happy with the monarchy, didn't like the concept of it, the royal family, but just felt constitutionally this was probably the best option. So I'm hoping worst case that happens in this country. I don't think, I think I agree with you. I don't see a referendum happening. But I think you make a really good point that I think people probably should start to really talk about the positives of the monarchy. I always like to go, I've done quite a few of these on the monarchy, naturally, Commonwealth, being there. And, there's so much, people talk about the expense, the lowest estimations are around 40 million they cost to all the way up to like 500 million, depending on where you read. Then, it generates more than 1.3 billion pounds for our economy. So
there's something like, I think that's the figure that's often trotted out, isn't it? It's about 1.3 billion.
So there's that. But I like the one I've started recently going on with for my pro monarchy, pro queen stuff is the identity side of things. I think it get like one of the, and I'd be interested in your take on this. One of the problems I see across the globe, America's a really good example where I think they, being a young country, they almost struggle with the identity. Some of them identify with the use of guns. Some of them use the idea, the concept of this American dream idea. They all have different parts of the Constitution which they embody as being American. And I think for us, the royal family, the monarchy, when someone says to me about being British, I genuinely think of the Queen, royal family, monarchy is so I like that kind of identity, I suppose. What's your sort of take on it?
Yeah, so start off with the first point about the Australian referendum. I completely agree with you, and this is not to get too broad in it, but the fundamental problem of people who are always against something is people are against something for multiple different reasons. So then trying to get those people to agree with something never works. It's one of the reasons most kind of social justice things or anything like that often fails, is because they end up splintering and they end up arguing amongst themselves rather than actually arguing with their opposition. So that's why stuff like that tends to fail. And I think if we ever see that in the UK, that's what I expect to happen. When it comes to the identity thing, I think you make a really, really good point. And for the life of me, I can't remember who said this, but I always thought it was a really good quote about the point of the monarchy, is that they wallpaper over the cracks. Is that the royal family kind of holds the country together. They're like a bit of a glue, really, because we are a kind of very disparate nation. We do kind of all have very different identities, and we all, whether we're Northern, Southern, Londoner, Mancunian, Scouse, like we all, but like you said, when we all talk about what it means to be British, the kind of concept of the royal family comes together. And I think it comes down to this, the fact that I think we have a natural sense of what is right and what is wrong, which is one thing I've always loved about the UK. We know when something's not right. I mean, we have a phrase for it. When we say so it's not cricket, we have a phrase for that. And I think the royal family kind of embody that. But more importantly, it's that essence of public service and public duty. And I think that is something that we all lend ourselves to, that kind of thing, that when we're called upon to do something for a bigger purpose, I think the Brits always rise to that occasion. I don't think no matter where you come from in the British Isles, I think we always rise to that. And I think that, again, is embodied within the Queen and embodied within the royal family. And I think you are right when it comes to that identity aspect. When it comes to America, I was listening to Jordan Peterson, who I know some people will find controversial, but he always praises constitutional monarchies because he makes this really good point about how you have an executive, a legislature, and a judiciary. But he also said the one thing that constitutional monarchies give you is a sense of symbolism, is that they give you, everybody in the nation, something to hold on to. And the reason that America's really struggles is because they don't have that. Their symbols are interchangeable because they don't have a constant figure to hold on to. And it's true in other countries where they don't have that one person or that one institution to which is a constant. And I think as we kind of move into very difficult political times, and having something that is above the kind of tit for tat politics, something that is above the kind of day-to-day stuff to hold on to to kind of grasp in our hands, I think is so important. And I think that's what the purpose of the royal family will be and should be. And I think you're right. I think it's something that we can all identify towards. It's something we can all kind of hold us together. There's a great piece in the Times that's just out today saying that the Queen's funeral will be a moment for the nation and the world to come together. And it's the woman who writes it says, like, she says, the headline is a bit wishy-washy, but the funeral will have a purpose. Is that it kind of shows, doesn't matter where you come from, where in the world or in the UK, doesn't matter whether you're white or black or gay or straight or whatever, any of that stuff. But we all have respect for one person and that one figure and that person, what that person represented. And it's a brilliant piece. And I think you're spot on, really, in what you said.
I think so many people will agree with how much the Queen sort of has brought us together. I think that's the good thing, and what's happened in the last week or so is, even through this tragic event, it just seems to have united us. Like, even I've been pleasantly surprised, even with a lot of the anti-monarchists. I know there's some, not so nice ones on Twitter and stuff, but largely I think it's actually been, I expected it a lot worse, to be honest. I know we saw the Celtic fans being in football and a few booing and stuff, but largely I think it's been a lot better than I think a lot of people expected. So that's definitely a real...
That I will 100% agree with you with. When the news kind of broke that there was that the Queen wasn't very well, and that on that day, and the rumors were traveling like at 100 mph about whether she'd passed away or not, and all the rest of it. The thing that really jumped to my mind was the thought, Twitter is going to be absolutely awful.
Yeah.
And it was literally the first thing I thought of, which is really sad. But I spend a lot of my time on Twitter, and Twitter does play a big part in politics, no matter what anybody says. So we do have to pay attention to it. But I just thought it's going to be just rancid. It's going to be toxic, and I just thought, oh no. But actually, like you said, I've been really surprised. Like you said, there are some horrible people, some attention seekers and all the rest of you. But I've just tended to just a swift block with those people, or just ignore them, and usually they go away. But yeah, you are right that Twitter's been a lot better behaved than I thought. But there has been one troubling aspect, and it's not just on Twitter, but we're starting to see it creep into other things. Is really two things. One, I don't really like it when people use the argument, this is what the Queen would have wanted, or this isn't what the Queen would have wanted, when they're trying to justify, say, with businesses closing or things to do with the football. And I don't really like that. I don't like putting words in other people's mouths. I like, unless it's specifically written somewhere after they die, I tend it's best not to give opinions to dead people. I just think that's just a solid rule. And the second one is, it's becoming a little bit of a competition now as to who's mourning the right way, who's showing the most respect. And it's becoming, that is starting to creep in, which was, and also my thought, I think it was Saturday, Friday last week, where I started to see this a little bit, but it's starting to really take off now, particularly with shops closing and some, I think with the nurses apparently are going to march in front of the coffin and stuff. I've already seen some people on Twitter starting to get a bit angsty about that. And I'm just like, it's starting to turn into the little bit of a competition. It's the kind of what happened with COVID, sadly, was, I care the most about this. Like, it's somehow it's stopping being about the Queen and it's starting to make it personal again, which it sadly is what social media has a tendency to do. But I really hoped we could have got through this without that creeping in. But it just seemed to be knocked down by a lot of people with big platforms on there saying, like, no, everyone's entitled to mourn their own way and show the respect how they want to. But there are still some people saying, oh, that's not the Queen, what the Queen would have wanted, or anything like that. And for me, I just get very uncomfortable with those arguments. But again, it's one of those, what people think is, what people think is the respectful thing to do is usually the right thing. People know what's right and what's wrong in these situations. Just a general gut thing.
I think it's largely, I think that what the government's done is, so I think it's largely been the right thing to do, to be honest. Everything that they've kind of done in terms of the bank holiday and just everything, I think it's been, I I think it's been well done, to be honest. I don't think there's
Yeah.
anything a negative I can really say, or outrightly positive. I think it's just a sensible approach, and
Yeah, I completely agree with it. Obviously, it's Operation London Bridge, isn't it? Is
yeah,
the name that's given to all the proceedings and all the rest of it. But I think so far, touch wood, everything at time of recording, everything has, I think, worked out brilliantly. I know there's some people are complaining about the length of the queue and all the rest of it, and whether that was necessary, and or everybody will have their own little bit to chime in on. But I think overall, and I expect the funeral and the rest of the ceremonies and all the rest of it, I think will be absolutely marvelous. I think it will do the country proud. I think it will do the royal family proud. And I think it just kind of shows that, we have a tendency in this country to kind of talk ourselves down. And I think, in a way, the Queen's funeral is going to really show that, you know what, we're not down and out. Yeah, things might be tough, but look, we can still do this. And I think there's also that added bonus, I think, that's going to come from the Queen's funeral. And I don't really mean that in a kind of nasty way or anything like that, but I think I think there's something good can come out of this funeral, and something really positive, and a message not just for the country but for the rest of the world, because let's be honest, the rest of the world is going to be watching. I think we'll do ourselves proud, and I think so far I think we've done ourselves exceptionally proud. Like I say, I was really surprised that we've not heard anything about any kind of fights in the queue, or we've not really heard. I think there was one guy in Scotland, wasn't there, that got dragged away by the police or something like that. I have to admit, I saw the story and I wasn't really that fussed about reading it, but I think wasn't he arrested or something like that. And
right.
you get a couple of people, but like I said, overall, everybody I think has been very well behaved and done this with dignity. And I think we've behaved exceptionally well on the world stage.
I think that's a good way to end this. It's great to have you on, Peter, and really enjoy talking about the monarchy and stuff. I'm sure we're going to have lots more conversations about this in the coming months and probably years as this debate heats up. But I think for now, it's just good that, it's amazing you queued up yesterday and got your opportunity to, pay.
My feet at the minute are very aware of how long I queued yesterday. That I can tell you for nothing.
Well, good to have you on, Peter, and I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Speak to you soon.